Yesterday, a senior State Department official was testifying at Bradley Manning's sentencing hearing. And he was talking about, why Manning should be in jail for a long, long, long time. He said that Manning's leak of classified documents to WikiLeaks had, and I quote, a chilling effect, end quote, on U.S. foreign relations. Gee, you think? Other countries are not happy because we spy on them? I mean, much of the Manning case comes down to one simple fact. The U.S. government, we got caught spying on innocent civilians and diplomats, both inside the United States and outside the United States. And now they're going to metaphorically shoot the messenger. I mean, they're not going to shoot Manning, but, send the guy who spilled the beans, Bradley Manning, to jail for years and years and years. Think about that for a second. I mean, isn't this approach that the federal government is taking in the Manning case like a shoplifter saying that his big problem is not that he shoplifted, but that he got caught red-handed? Or like a cheating husband saying that his marital relationship has been harmed because he was caught in bed with another woman? Rather than owning up and saying, yeah, okay, we take responsibility for our actions. Our government is playing a game of pass the blame that's really designed to divert our attention from its own misdeeds. And to make matters worse, the mainstream media in America has fallen hook, line, and sinker for the government's attempt to shift blame from itself onto Bradley Manning. I mean, just think about it. Our media is not seriously questioning what the government has been up to. The things that Manning revealed is not discussing the actual context of Manning's document leaks, and they've basically been vilifying him ever since the day he was arrested. Jeremy Scahill was on Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman, and he had this to say. He laid it out pretty straightforward when he was on Amy Goodman's show.
When those in power want to gin up support for a war, they know who to call in the powerful media outlets. When they want to tamp down any public awareness of an issue, they know how to make it a non-story. And their colleagues in the media have been utterly complicit in this. There has been more coverage of the indictment of that Real Housewives lady and her husband than there has of Bradley Manning. And this is the state of media in this country right now, and it is just devastating that we don't have a media culture that says this trial should have been gavel-to-gavel coverage.
Indeed. So let's, in the spirit of that, let's go back over the details of what the mainstream media has, by and large, missed over the course of the Bradley Manning trial. They've missed the fact that Manning's leaks revealed that U.S. defense contractors were complicit in child trafficking in Afghanistan. Seriously. According to leaked documents, DynCorp, a giant defense contracting firm that makes about $2 billion a year in revenue from you and me, from our taxpayer dollars, threw a party for Afghan security recruits using boys purchased from child traffickers for entertainment. Mainstream media also missed the appalling revelations from the Guantanamo files, which describe how some detainees at that military prison were arrested on, the New York Times called it, highly subjective evidence. There was one case where poor farmers were captured when they were seen wearing a style of watch or a type of jacket that was the same watch or jacket that was worn by al-Qaeda terrorists. People who had done nothing. These were just farmers. Yet those innocent farmers may still be in Guantanamo among the 80-some prisoners who have already been cleared for release because they didn't do anything wrong. And we've imprisoned and tortured them for 6 years. More than 6 years. And the mainstream media also missed reports that U.S. military officials deliberately withheld information about the killings of 2 Reuters staff members, the 2 Reuters photographers, and a dozen innocent civilians in Baghdad back in 2007, July 12th to be exact. It was that video, when that video got released, when Bradley Manning took that video and put it on WikiLeaks, and WikiLeaks put it out, and it got played by the media in the United States for a short while. Everybody now seems to have forgotten that came from Bradley Manning. That not only was what was kind of a tipping point in terms of our saying, hey, wait a minute, maybe this war really isn't all that good, and maybe we're not doing the best stuff over there. Here we are killing innocent civilians and journalists. But it also started our government's efforts to hunt down Bradley Manning. Bottom line here is that while the U.S. government is using Bradley Manning as a scapegoat for their own less than desirable actions, our mainstream media is letting them get away with it by not doing their jobs, not reporting on the real significance. In the next week or so, Bradley Manning is virtual certainty going to get a very long prison sentence. The news came out today that he was arguing that his lawyers were arguing that many of the charges against him are duplicative, that he's being charged 3 or 4 different ways and times for the exact same crime. And the judge agreed today and said, okay, the maximum that we're looking at right now is 90 years. Right. Now, he still hasn't been sentenced. It may be considerably less than that, but it's going to be, well, I shouldn't pre-guess. We'll see where it's going to go. But in the meantime, our mainstream media really needs to wake up and report. I mean, this is supposed to be their job, to report the real significance of Manning's actions. And you and I, we should all be watching and listening. We should be paying careful attention to this to say, when is our media going to start talking about what actually happened? I mean, you can agree or disagree with, Bradley Manning. One of the points that the guy from the State Department made yesterday was that, the State Department is finding that some diplomats are reluctant to talk to American diplomats because, it might get released by some future Bradley Manning in diplomatic cables. Well, welcome to the real world. If there wasn't stuff in those cables that indicated that our government had been committing crimes and lying to us, I personally am convinced, and I hope the judge in Manning's case is as well, that Bradley Manning never would have released that information. He didn't do this to make money. He didn't do it out of malice. He did it because he believed in a United States of America that held itself to the high standards that it has proclaimed for 200 years, and that has consistently, generation after generation after generation for those 200 plus years, gotten better. We ended slavery. Women got the vote. I mean, we're still a long way in terms of race relations and misogyny and equal pay for equal work. We still have a ways to go. But every generation, until the Bush administration, it had been getting better and better in this country. Our republic had become more and more open. Our systems of governance had become, well, you can say we've had some problems since Reagan, but in fact, I'd say we've had a lot of problems since Reagan. But the security stuff, I mean, when we genuinely went insane was right after 9/11, when George W. Bush and Dick Cheney were so terrified that they went to the intelligence agencies and said, please save us from that big bad man. I don't care if we have to give up our civil liberties. Please save us. And the NSA said, sure, we'll save you. Just let us look under the bed of every American. No problem. You just shouldn't make those kind of deals.